let's get started. These are our session objectives for this morning. We're going to install and configure SCM 2.5, the new version. We're going to analyze baselines, import existing GPOs, export existing GPOs. We're going to work with a local GPO tool from ground zero. We're going to install it and do a lot of demos in that. And Santos, we're going to...
Once we finish learning a little bit about what SCM does, what are the baseline, and how do we set up the guys in Security Compliance Manager, we're going to export these baselines in different methods, and we're going to deploy them using different methods, like Elias just explained. We're going to use GPOs to deploy some of this Security Compliance Manager, but we're also going to use Configuration Manager. So we're going to take these baselines and we're going to import them into System Center Configuration Manager 2012. That's what we're going to do after that.
So my first question is, who is familiar with SCM? Who have tried it, played with it, downloaded it? Okay.
All right. That's good.
Nice. SCM basically is a solution accelerator. It's been there for a while. We're now on version 2.5. And it's a totally free solution supported by Microsoft. If you go back in time, a few years ago, we had the solution, the security guides. The security guides were like, I don't know, 400 pages long. Basically, were the Microsoft security recommendations, what you need to follow to be secure. Everybody, knew that we needed to apply those settings, but no one had the time, to read the whole guide or guides. There were like, I don't know, like 20 or more, and then apply all these, GPOs. So Microsoft made a great decision to, place those guides into a tool, and that's SCM. Basically, it provides a way to view baselines, compare baselines, and then apply those baselines. The end result is going to be a DCM or a GPO pack, and it helps us, met and reduce security threats at the end of the day. So it's a very easy tool.
So the goal, right, after we analyze and review Security Compliance Manager was to make and ensure that every single corporation can analyze those baselines and can be secure with some of the basic regulations on every system, like HIPAA, GLBA, and FISPA. Some of these visa requirements or law requirements that we need to enforce, that we have talked about, that we have it written in the security guidance, right? So sometimes to bring that into life is a little bit more complicated. It takes time, it takes days just to develop something to make those machines in compliance. And this is where these packs of the baselines will take over.
And also going manual means that we can have human error. We are not perfect, right? So let's talk about the key features in SCM. Santos, can you tell us about the key features?
Some of the features that came in this new version that was released, by the way, this month of April, and every one of you have a copy of it on your USB stick. If you open that USB, you will find the solution accelerators right there. But besides providing this solution with Configuration Manager, we also bring over IT GRC pack, which is a governance and risk and compliance assessment for environment. So we integrate also with Service Manager and Configuration Manager and all the other products of System Center. So this integration between the Security Compliance Manager and Service Manager and the rest of the product of System Center will bring and add on to every one of you to make sure that everyone is in compliance.
Okay. So basically, we have the option to also create a gold master. Deploy those policies and have a ready machine that you can just start deploying on different branches. One of the great things about SCM is that it can help us secure standalone machines. Here's the thing. Usually we have a domain controller, we have all the GPOs in our domain controller, and then we need to deploy it. What about the branches? If we don't have a DC on a branch, or if we're working with maybe a web farm, so we need to deploy specific GPOs and secure those servers with different roles and products, not only Windows, I mean Exchange, SQL, a bunch of server products. So SCM is going to help us apply those GPO into standalone machines without the need of a domain controller. Always having the security guys in place, updated, and if Microsoft releases a new update for that baseline or security guy, you're going to get it automatically through the tool.
So sometimes to get into a work group, for example, to apply a group policy is not possible, right? Because these work group machines are not domain joined. Let's say you have a machine or a server in the DMC, but you want to make sure that that server in the DMC is also secure with your best practice and is in compliance. So the way to get there will be to create a baseline in Security Compliance Manager and apply that baseline into these servers in the DMC or those computers that are non-domain joined. And this was very hard to achieve before we have SCM.
So Santos, what else is new in 2.5?
So the other things that we bring over into SCM 2.5, besides the compatibility and the support with the System Center products, so some of the main baselines we focus on the SCM 2.5 was to work with the Exchange servers and the Windows Server environments. So we create these security guides that we have implemented for Exchange in the past, and we convert them into baselines. So this baseline is basically those guides that we wrote into a template. And we can use this template by default and apply this template into every environment using SCM, using either local GPO or using compliance setting in Configuration Manager. And some of those are the settings that we're going to take over and we will look today.
Okay, so also we have new baselines for Exchange Server 2007 SP3 and 2010 Source Pack 2. And, updated baseline for existing products as XP Service Pack 3, Vista Service Pack 2, 7 SP1, Office 2010 SP1, and IE8. So, what else? Installing and configuring SCM 2.5. Let's go from ground zero. It uses SQL Server Express, which is totally free. It can also connect to an existing, database that you have in your enterprise. It downloads and unpacks all release baselines. It also includes local GPO, which is a tool that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And like Santos says, it helps us, get into compliance with all the compliance certifications. Let's go and do a demo of this. Installing SCM 2.5. So let's go to this machine. Okay, so this is a Windows 7 machine, SP1. Basically, what I'm going to do is run the Security Compliance Manager installer. Like Santos said, you have this on your USB stick. Just for you to know, I did, Windows update on this machine, and you have two requirements: installing the C++ distributable, which is like, I don't know, very small, and also .NET Framework 4.0. That's it. So this is the installer. Welcome. Okay. One important thing is that we need to or it's very nice to select the check for updates automatically at startup, and set the terms. The next thing that it's going to ask us is, do you have the SQL Express 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 installer, or do you want me to download and install it for you? For time reason of this session, we have the installer here. We're going to click Next, browse for the installer, and it's on the desktop, and click Next. Accept the SQL Server and User License Agreement, and here's the end result. I'm going to install SQL Express and install SCM.
And on this version of Security Compliance Manager, we require to have a local instance of SQL. In the next version of Security Compliance Manager, we're going to do installation of the remote instances also. So just for this case on SCM 2.5, we require to have a local instance. So that's one of the reasons we are actually downloading the SQL Express up front and having a copy of it. If we don't have a copy of it, it will download that for you and we'll get it installed. But we require an instance locally on that machine that we're installing SCM.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, basically, SQL is going to take a long time installing. We're going to keep going with the presentation. And, every, 10 minutes, we're going to switch back to see when SQL, finish the installation, and we will check out the product.
All right.
Additional features. Santos, can you tell us any additional feature of 2.5?
So besides the baselines, we can also, like I mentioned, we have the GPO's information. And the GPO structure is very complicated using Active Directory, right? We have set up Active Directory in a way we can apply and we can check whether or not those machines are compliant with the GPOs. But in this environment, we're trying to get those GPOs implemented into machines that are non-domain joined. So in the SCM, we will be able to manage those GPOs on a machine, and we'll be able to grab a copy of those GPOs and get it associated to a specific product like Exchange, like we mentioned earlier, or the Windows 7 Service Pack 1 machine. Once we get that associated to that specific product, we can say, oh, this GPO is going to belong to this type of product, and it's going to be from a standalone machines. Then after that, we can deploy it to those machines. But it's not just that. If we want to integrate this with our Active Directory, let's say we're going to make sure it's in compliance using our baseline, you can export this into a GPO and then go into Active Directory and import this as ADMX into the system, and then you are going to be applying a secure GPO into your environment too, which it makes this not just non-domain joined, but also manage and improve your Active Directory systems.
So again, editing baselines. Like I said, we have a bunch of baselines. After we install the baseline, the SCM, all the baselines are going to download, install, be imported into the SCM console, basically. And all the baselines are read-only. If you want, you can create a copy of those baselines and then make all the modifications that you want.
So the baselines, right? We download those baselines from Microsoft Download Center at the beginning of the installation. So you get those templates by default. So the reason for not letting you guys modify those templates is if you lose, you're going to lose that template at the end. So we prefer you making a copy of that template and use it on your own. Remember, these baselines are based on the security guidance. So we have around 200 and 300 specific settings on each baseline. So you may want to lower some of these settings to specific to your organization. But if you just want to start out with the main guidelines, say, hey, I need everything that is in this guide to make my healthcare company in compliance, or to make my financial institution in compliance in my workstation, I'm just going to go ahead, use that baseline and deploy it.
Okay, so thank you, Santos. So basically, at the left pane of SCM, we're going to have all the baselines. And if we go to the right pane, it's going to be the actions pane. Basically, we have the ability to import a GPO or import a cap file, an SCM cap file. We can compare the baselines, merge, export, and add a specific setting to that baseline. The easier way to see it and know this is to basically go and do a demo. So let's analyze some baselines. Again, this is another VM. The other one is running in the back and installing SQL. We're going to go back to that in a few minutes. So this is Security Compliance Manager, a pretty simple tool. If you go to the left pane, we have all the baselines based on every product. Again, SQL, Change, IE. If we go to the Windows 7 SP1, we have the security compliance, computer security compliance, and the domain security compliance, and user security compliance. If we click one of those, in the middle pane, we're going to see basically the baseline. You can see what's the default parameter, the default value, what's the Microsoft recommendation, and what's the customized and severity level for that. Basically, you can see that all this are, the default is disabled, 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 and for some of these are enabled. So that's basically what initially was on the security guide and now is here, is making the recommendation for you. The other thing that you can do is, import, export, all the actions are in the right pane. And we're going to go that and make some exports and imports of several GPOs throughout the presentation.
So importing the baselines. Now you guys have seen a little bit of the Security Compliance Manager console. We'll go later on and we will review more in depth some of this baseline. I will show you how to export some of these baselines, import and merge. So basically you can have like a domain security compliance setting and then a member setting compliant. Maybe you have a server that has multiple roles. Let's say you have a server that have a DHCP and then you have a DNS, and you may have another roles that we normally have servers that has multiple roles. So we want to create a big baseline using those two roles. So in this system, we will be able to merge those two baselines and convert it into one. So if you want to do that, you will be able to do that and achieve it. Then you can export this baseline and import the same baseline to Active Directory and do the same. Or use it with Configuration Manager to import and deploy those baselines into your systems.
Nice. What else, Santos?
So exporting the baselines. Once we select that baseline that we have analyzed and reviewed, we are ready to deploy that baseline. So two things will happen. We need to select that baseline that we have analyzed and reviewed in Security Compliance Manager, and we need to export it. Once we export it, we can export it into GPO. And this GPO basically will create an ADMX or an XML file which store all the settings that are needed for that group policy to work correctly. Also, you can export this into a local GPO. This will be the method for you guys to deploy it into the non-domain joined machines. The other method to exportation that we're going to take a look today will be exporting this baseline into a CAF file, and that CAF file, we're going to use it in System Center. And then we'll say, oh, Security Compliance Manager, we got this baseline. We want to have it in Configuration Manager. Then we will be able to deploy it. And this compliance setting, it was what it used to be Desired Configuration Manager. So this product worked with Configuration Manager 2007 and with the 2012 version that we just released. So you can use the same baseline for your 2000 product today, and then once you get your 2012 environment, you will be able to leverage the same baseline.
Yes. Santos, can I ask you a favor?
Yeah, sure.
Can you please show us how to export and import?
Definitely. Let's take a look into your VMs real quick, and I will show that to the audience. All right, so here we got the Security Compliance Manager. Let me put this full screen. All right. So like we mentioned, we have the guides. So each of the guides, that will be your start point. So if you want to take a look at the guides, you will see the guides here in the Security Compliance Manager. So you'll go ahead here and see Security Guides. And this is a document you may want to have and open it into your system. If you double click, he will provide you where exactly that guide it is. So we can read that guide and say, hey, what specifically this baseline it is, and how do we want to manage this baseline? And then we will look at how to export this baseline. Say, hey, yeah, I need this baseline for my Exchange server, or I need this baseline for my Windows server.
So what you're saying is that we still have the reference, the guide reference.
Right.
We can print that out. Everything is in place. Plus, we have a way to automatically do things, right?
And I normally recommend reading the guide before deciding whether or not this baseline will work with your environment, right? Either it's a healthcare or financial institution or a government institution that we want to review some of the regulations we have to be in compliance in a monthly or yearly basis. We can review this, and then every single guide have a goal and purpose and a scope of this baseline. So you guys are not alone. So we are not showing you just a template that you're going to play with it and you're just going to throw it into your space. You have to read it and analyze this through the guides. And we'll tell you, hey, these are ITGRC that we have, the government risk and compliance settings. We're going to evaluate and we're going to deploy this baseline. And I'm reviewing an Exchange server. And then we say, oh, this will make sure that every mailbox is in compliance with this baseline. Once we get that and we review it, for example, we're going to select that baseline. And we're going to say, oh, I want to basically analyze the Exchange baseline. So we will put Exchange CAS, for give you an example. So two things we can do here. We can decide to export this into a GPO. Once we get that into the GPO, I will set this here. We set SCM demo. Just give me a second. So we're going to export this into GPO. So what we do now, two things. We can review this folder that we import into my desktop. So we have it here, and it's a GID of the baseline. We open that up, and we basically see those XML that we were talking about. Then later on, we're going to use this tool. We're going to implement this one into my template. So this is a security template that we normally input. You guys remember security configuration, analysis and configuration of every machine. So basically that INI file is very similar to what we're doing here. So that INI file normally gets converted into a GPO, and that's what we have here.
That's a security configuration wizard, right?
Right, security configuration wizard. So we can actually do a SCAP or any other product. For this example, we can also do configuration manager. We can say, oh, we're going to convert this into a DCM policy. We go to our desktop, to our folder, and we say, oh, we're going to create this one. But in this case, this will be for configuration manager. And we'll basically exporting that CAF file into configuration manager later on. So we just export it from the system so we can later use this one.
Can I ask you another favor?
Sure.
Can you later on show us how to work with all that in Configuration Manager?
Definitely, we will do that. So let's say we have modified that backup, or we have exported a GPO. We can later on use this one and import it. We can import the same one. For this case, we can select the same one, and we can import it into a system. And basically, those baselines, you can manage and move those baselines from one server or one machine to another. Let's say you're testing this in your lab. Once you analyze and review your baseline, you say, hey, this is the baseline I want. I want to import it now into production. You can move those files and import it into production. Or you want to share that baseline that you built for your system. Basically, you create that file and give it to somebody. Say, hey, import this into SCM, review it, and later use it into production. So that's more likely the import, export, and that we were talking about.
Nice. Thank you, Santos.
No problem.
So the other tool we have is local GPO. Local GPO is a tool that's been there for a while. And when you install SCM, it's not installed by default. I mean, it's contained in the program files, Microsoft Security Compliance Manager folder, and then you need to go to LGPO. Inside that folder, you will find an MSI. And with that MSI, again, you need to manually install it. You can deploy it using, group policy or configuration manager, or manually install it in a machine. And the great feature about this is that it supports and can configure multiple local GPOs. So let's see how our installation is going first. Installation successful. So let's click Finish. And let's take a look at Security Compliance Manager here. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to start importing all the baselines. That's going to take, a few minutes also. In the meanwhile, let's switch to the other VM, and let's see local GPO. Where is it? And let's play with it a little bit. We go to Program Files, Microsoft Security Compliance Manager, LGPO. So there you have local GPO installer. It's an MSI. Just next, finish, and that's it. The end result is basically this. We're in the local GPO folder, and we have the ability to, create, export, restore policies. So I created this document for you guys. It's going to be made available also in the PPT for you at the end as a note. The first example is to export a GPO backup to the local group policy of a computer. And here's an example. You need to type cscript local GPO.wsf /path and the actual path of the folder where the GPO is located. I mean, the GPO backup. You previously need to go to SCM and click Export, as Santos just showed us, and have your path for your local GPO. So if we copy this, and go to local GPO, basically it automatically will run and say modifying the policy, and I have applied a valid INF file for this, for the computer, for the policy, for the unaudited policy, etc., etc. It's very easy, simple as that. Just click, no problem. Again, at the end result it says local policy modify. And please restart your computer, as you usually do, or a GPU update, whatever.
So basically, we took some of those baseline, right? We created a GPO backup, like I showed you guys earlier. We take that GPO backup, and we say, oh, we're going to deploy this one to a non-domain joiner. So we just basically copy that into that machine with the local GPO, and we applied that into a system. You can do that manually to do that, or you can use configuration manager later on just to apply that baseline.
The other thing is, what happened if I applied the GPOs or the GPOs didn't work for me? How many policies had I applied in that template? Basically, it's a simple switch, the restore switch, which you can copy and just run on that machine and say, see.
Yeah,
sure.
he will zoom it right now.
that good? Whoa.
Sure. Can you step up to the microphone real quick so everybody can listen to the question? Sorry about that.
No problem. Will this restore to the computer's default or where it was previously? So would you erase anything that might have been set locally?
Right.
It will only restore the policies applied through local GPO.
Right.
Again, just in this case, just the previous one. If you have applied, I don't know, 3 or 4 different GPOs, it's going to restore it to the initial state from all the GPOs applied through local GPO.
Right. For example, if you apply this GPO to a non-domain joined, you pretty much know that there's no other rules that are right there, right? But if you have manually applied some rules, only will restore to that state for the rules that you already apply. Only local GPO will restore what he did. So he have like a log file to know what exactly changes he did, so he can roll those changes back whenever you actually made a mistake applying the wrong GPO to that specific machine. So if you do it in your domain joined machines, they will still get their domain policies, everything correctly. So if you do a local GPO to that machine and you need to restore it, it will restore it to the state of the normal GPO of AD, basically. That answer? All right.
So let's go ahead and run the restore command. It will restore all the settings, and that's it. Please restart your computer, or CC as that. The other option that we have is to export a local group policy to a GPO backup. And same thing, same script. Let's minimize this. Put the path in here.
Yeah, can you zoom it real quick?
Yeah, I'm going to submit it in a bit. MMS space / export. Is it good? Like this? Yep.
Yeah.
So as simple as that, again, just export the current local policy of that machine. So if you're preparing that golden machine, that target machine, you can just apply all the policies you want and then just export that, and you will get a GPO that you can then import into your domain controller. Is that useful for anybody? Yes?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes we are working harder in a machine to make sure that specific machine is in compliance and regulation for a specific department. Let's say a business division or a business intelligence division, that we want to make sure that is in compliance, or in investment banking that we want to make sure that those are in compliance whenever it's possible. Or people like underwriters, right? That we normally want to make sure that underwriting is in place in the healthcare companies and they are compliant with every single setting because it's a sensitive data that they work. Sometimes we want to make sure that machine is in compliance. And after that, we say, oh, but we make sure that machine is compliant, but we have 20 underwriters, or we have thousands of underwriters. So we can basically export that backup into that machine and say, hey, I'm going to deploy this local GPO. I'm going to create it to the underwriters and say, hey, this GPO is going to apply to all the underwriting department.
Yeah, but here's the other question. What if I don't have, or I need to deploy some policies to computers that are totally standalone? I don't have a domain controller on a branch, but I have my golden setting, my golden image, my standard set of policies. Basically the same command, but then we add the GPO pack switch, and that is gonna export a GPO pack. And let me show you what a GPO pack is. MMS, and the last one, which is this one. Inside this policy, what we're going to find is basically local pol, which is a tool that is going to apply with the GPO package script, basically all those policies. So let me just compare. This is the policy that Santos just exported a few minutes ago. Is that just a regular policy ADMX file, And this is the one that I just exported. It includes the tools and scripts to apply this policy. And here's the thing. You don't need, when you export a GPO pack, you don't need local GPO on the target machines. You can just go to that machine, you know, travel, go remotely connect to that computer. And if you go to CMD with elevated privileges, you can just go ahead and type this path and set GPO pack. And this is the result. Apply GPO pack to local policy. Again, you don't need to install local GPO on every of those remote target machine. They are totally standalone. You don't need to install anything. That's the difference between the GPO pack and the restore switch only. Another very useful switch is the edit a collection of local GPOs using multiple local GPO. Do you know what a multiple local GPO is? It was a feature that was introduced initially in Windows Vista. Basically, in Windows XP, we just can go to gpedit.msc and create a policy, and those policies we apply to every user that sits on that computer. Since Vista, you have the option to create a policy for the computer, and I mean that will be the only policy because there is only one machine. But if you apply the user configuration part of the policy, you can apply different policies to different users. Let me show you where that feature is in case you haven't played with that. So if you go to MMC, and within MMC, you go to Add, Remove, Snap In. And go to the local group policy editor. What we're going to find is that if we click Browse, we now have the option to select different users. And again, this has been there since Vista. And basically, I can apply this policy to test user 1. And the end result is that I'm just going to get the, let me add test user 2 also, so we can compare it. And basically, in the first node, what I'm seeing is the user configuration for test user 1. I mean, if I just go to gpedit and apply a policy to the computer configuration, it will get, obviously for the computer, it doesn't matter what user is going to be seated on that machine. But if I go through here and add to that specific user, it will get to that user, not just every user that sits on that machine. So it's a very useful tool, and now local GPO can integrate with that in order to apply user GPOs through this tool. So we have here command. Let's just, one thing that you need to make sure is that you're actually working with a user baseline of user GPO, a GPO that has user configuration. Because I have seen clients in the field that told me, hey, I tried to apply this policy to this user. Yes, but you were applying a computer security compliance, not the user security compliance. So the end result is going to be, hey, you're not applying any user configuration. So let's go to local GPO. Run as administrator, yeah. And we can just type in the path for that particular policy that has user configuration. And if you can see the very last part, it says the switch is multiple local GPO test user 1. You can do this for groups or for users. Hit enter, and that's it. Test 1, multiple local GPO, modify.
All right. That is just great, right? Having the ability to apply multiple GPOs into a script method. Sometimes we spend so much time in one group policy, and then we want to make sure that that policy for that user works fine. Once we got that set up, it's good to be able to apply that into multiple users without having any problems between one user and another.
So yeah, basically, as we have just shown you in the demo, you can use local GPO to apply a backup to the local machine. You can use the path command to specify the folder. And you have the two options. The one that, without using local GPO, the GPO pack, and that totally removes the need of a domain controller. And like Santos Solos, you can also lock down those, standalone computers that are basically in the DMC, or, this tool is very, very easy to use, very simple, lightweight, and it's very powerful. We also have the ability to export local policy to a GPO backup, and basically that was the demo that I just shown you. You can just do it as a standalone or for a domain controller backup that you can just import. What are local GPO features do we have? We can restore all the local policy to the default settings. We have the GPO pack and the local pol tools. They are the ones that help us to deploy those to standalone machines. And basically that was the demo, deploying all those.
So now that we learned a little bit about Security Compliance Manager, we know how powerful this tool it is. We know the method of deploying them using local GPO. So we know how to use group policies and how to import these group policies into their system in AD. But now we have a tool in System Center Configuration Manager 2012 that is basically says compliance setting. So using compliance setting, we'll be able to deploy these baselines to your enterprise, medium to enterprise level. So let's say you want to deploy this baseline to thousands and thousands of machines. So basically, once we analyze that baseline, we have it in a CAF file. We export that into our CAF file. We will be able to deploy it using Configuration Manager. And that's one of the settings that I would like to show you guys today during my demo. And I will try to explain a little bit more about what compliant it is into our system and what this does into our system. So I will go ahead and apply this into my demo. I will show you System Center 2012 Configuration Manager, and I will show you how Security Compliance Manager will be able to export this baseline. So we're going to select one baseline, and we're going to import that. So I have here a primary site server in the System Center 2012 Configuration Manager. So I will open Security Compliance Manager that I have here.
So Santos, what you're telling us is that this is not just a tool for small businesses?
So
it's also a tool for huge enterprises?
So System Center, right, has two divisions, right? It has what is called standard licensing and have a data center licensing.
Okay.
So it's built for medium business to enterprise level. So if you have 2,000 desktop or 1,000 desktop and you want to use this System Center product, you will be able to. Other medium businesses like 1 to 10 or 1 to 25 machines, you may be able to leverage your Active Directory better to create this baseline and deploy it than using Configuration Manager because the scale up of the product may be not useful for smaller businesses. So it's built for more medium to enterprise businesses.
I'm telling you this because I've heard in the past, this is a free tool, and free tools are meant, for small businesses.
That's correct.
In this case, it isn't, right?
Right. This tool, security compliance. So this security compliance manager tool is built from one to many, right? So it's built not just for one machine, it's built to a bigger and bigger enterprise too. So we're helping just small businesses, medium businesses, and even the technicians around will be able to leverage this GPO. I say, hey, I have some compliance setting, I'm just gonna apply this using my USBs and my GPO pack that I have on my USB. We'll be able to, go ahead and make those machines in compliant with some of the best practices. Nice. So here we got Security Compliance Manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 baseline group that we have right here. Like every other baseline, we have the guides. Make sure you always double check those guides, review it, analyze what this baseline is doing and how this baseline will leverage into my system. One thing that I will do is member server. So Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 member server security compliance. So I can do two things here. So I can make a decision. Let's say, hey, this baseline contains 234 settings, and all those settings I wanted for my compliance. But let's say I don't want all those settings. We can basically go into the settings itself. We can customize the setting by duplicating the baseline. Once we duplicate that baseline, we'll no longer be read-only. So it will be a baseline for me to use and modify for my different purpose. So we can do that. So the baseline is duplicated. So you see that now every of the settings that are part of that baseline are available for editing. So we can select that and we say, oh, I don't want this setting group. I don't want that setting. So let's say I don't want the authentication types on this baseline. I can say, all right, remove that. You can remove it from the system. I will clear out. So you can go ahead and start. So these templates give you just this head start. Just go ahead, review it. If you need everything, all right, use them everything. If you don't need them all, just make sure to modify the baseline to suit your business, to suit your needs. That will be one of the goals for Security Compliance Manager. On my case, I will go ahead and deploy this regular baseline that I have here, which is the member security. So I will go ahead, select this. I will go to the action pane, and the action pane say export. So in the export, it says SCCM 2007 DCM, which is System-Centered Configuration Manager 2007, Desired Configuration Manager. So Desired Configuration Manager in 2012 has been converted into a compliance setting. So that means that you can leverage this product to 2007 and to the 2012. Nice. So I will go ahead and export this to my to a folder here. I will do the same. I will do a SCM demo. SCM demo here, and I will save this. After I have saved this, I will go into Configuration Manager 2012 that I have here. I will go to a section set Asset and Compliance. Once I go into Asset and Compliance, I expand Compliance Setting. I go into Configuration Baselines. We do a right click into the baseline, and we set Import Baseline. So we select this baseline to be imported. We click Add here. We're going to locate that CAF file that we just created into my system. I'm going to open it. I'm going to say, yeah, no problem, and review it. So this baseline has one baseline and 15 configuration items. So each of the items contains multiple settings. Like I mentioned, it has around 265 settings. So it has been grouped into 15 configuration items on this baseline. So basically, this template is a little bit big. It has too much data that we may be able to leverage and make sure that my servers are in compliance right away. But maybe there are some settings that I don't want to be in compliance because my system has low profile. But for those high profile, I recommend just using the default. So while we wait here, let's give us a second for make sure that the baseline has been imported successfully.
Good. In the meanwhile, one recommendation that I have is go to the hands-on lab area, and there's Santos. Can you tell us a little bit about the hands-on lab that you created for the?
So we have a hands-on lab to review SCM and Configuration Manager. So you can go ahead and open a lab. It's called CDIL 327. So the CDIL 327 contains a lab like this. So you can go and basically go ahead and try to modify it, and then you can have some experience with SCM and Configuration Manager.
Basically do the same we're doing here, right?
Right, the same way I'm doing right now. So I just import that baseline and 15 items. I'm going to click Close. So what I do now is I have this baseline into Configuration Manager, and then I'm going to deploy that to my servers. So I have a Windows Server 2008 R2 baseline that I just export from SCM, and I'm going to deploy it to thousands of servers to make sure those servers are in compliance. So Configuration Manager can work with machines that are in the domain and machines that are non-domain. As long as we have access to those machines with a user account in those non-domain joined and have the Configuration Manager client, we will be able to deploy this baseline. So I go ahead and do a right-click into the baseline, click Deploy, and I'm going to select the collection that I want to make sure that collection has the servers. So I go ahead have this collection already pre-created. We set Server Checkup. So I'm going to just select that one, click OK. I'm going to lower this to 1 minute. So this setting is not recommended for 1 minute for your enterprise. I have it here for 1 minute for demo. But for every enterprise, you should look for compliance at least once a month. That will be the minimum I recommend to check for compliance in this type of settings. But there are settings that I want to check for compliance much more earlier. Like example of virus definition. I may want to check for virus definition and make sure my machines are in compliance at least 4 hours a day. So I can create a baseline to check for those definition, and whether or not that machine is in compliance every 4 hours. We can then say, hey, you got to actually download these definitions and apply the definitions. We can configure all that through the compliance setting item. So I just deployed that baseline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open my client in the same server here. And then I'm going to go to another server that I deployed that baseline. I'm going to look how everything is looking there. So what I do here is I go run this machine action, so you actually refresh the policy. I will also lower it here, and we go to one of the other servers. So I open the server, I go to Control Panel, All Items, and I open Configuration Manager Client. I will do the same. I will go to Actions, Machine Policy Retrieval, and then User Policy Retrieval. I close it, and I will open it again to check the configuration section. So I go into configuration section. I already have one baseline here being reviewed. I will click refresh to see if my other baseline has been populated down. So I will give it a minute. That is what I put into the baseline to be created. So I set machine policy retrieval, and I wait for that to happen. But while that happened, I already have deployed one baseline here that I will take a look. So once the baseline has been here created, we can click on View Report. It says empty, so it doesn't have any data. So I click Evaluate here. Make sure it's getting evaluated. Once that is done, I can click Report in that machine and see the report going on, or I can go into System Center Configuration Manager and actually take a look and see how the baseline has been deployed right now. I will go ahead and do that while we wait for the policy to be refreshed into the servers. So I reopen here Configuration Manager. I select that baseline, and I click Deployment. So once I click Deployment, we see here that the compliance state is still at 0%. That means it has not been summarized yet. So we can go into View Status. It will take us to the monitoring section, and we'll check what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run something called Run Summarization. And this Run Summarization will validate if that policy has run on any of my servers. Right now, I haven't seen any policy coming down yet, so we're going to wait a few seconds to see whether or not that policy is in place already. If I check up here on my other deployments, I can check this IE proxy too. View status here. So I do Run Summarization here, do refresh, see if I get any data yet. So I don't have any status yet coming back from the machines. So I have here, for example, no. That means that the client has not checked on yet on any of those. So we said, oh, client pass or check has not been checking on this machine yet, and then it's required. So we're going to wait a while for those machines to be in compliance.
So you basically need to wait till the client comes
right.
to the server and the policy.
That's correct.
Refreshed.
So every client, once we send this baseline, is basically going to download the baseline into their system, and it's going to check with Configuration Manager. Once it downloads the new policy saying that it needs to be in compliance, that's going to be applied in the server. Nice. So we can look into field logs, and we can go a little bit deep in troubleshooting this system. But since all I want to make sure is get it deployed into Configuration Manager, that's all I'm going to show in the demo. But we later on can check on these, and we can see whether or not this is status. So again, all we need to do once we got these baselines is go into Asset and Compliance, Configuration Manager, and then in the Compliance Settings section, we're going to import that baseline. Other thing that we can do, once we identify that baseline, and let's say we set that baseline, we want to make sure that we are in compliance with that baseline. You can open a setting right here and go Properties. Let's wait a second. So while this one is loading the properties, what I mean, we can actually monitor whether or not there are compliance. But let's say I want to remediate. Let's say I want to fix that machine that is non-compliant. I can go here in Configuration Manager. We have a section for remediation. So we go into the settings and say, oh, remediate this setting whenever you find it that is non-compliant. And that's one thing that I want to show you guys. We know that we are checking for compliance into Configuration Manager. We pull a report, whether they are compliant or not. If they are not compliant and you want to modify this setting to be overridden and ensure those machines are compliant, you can go here into the setting, modify the setting. For example, this is a registry value that I have. I will click Edit, go into Compliance Rule. Once you're in the rule, you can open the setting exactly this. It's saying, hey, check whether or not those proxies are equal to my default
but again,
proxy.
This is taking it a few steps a little bit further, right?
Right. This is like going beyond the check for compliance. Once we identify those machines that are compliant and non-compliant, that you want to make sure they are in compliance, you can go to each of the settings and you can say, oh, I want to make sure this machine is compliant. So all we have to do is in Configuration Manager, select and click the set, remediate those machines that are non-compliant when supported. Things that we support for remediation are registry scripts and things like that. If it's a script, it's a different method. We got to open. I'm going to open another setting that it actually has a script on it. So I'm going to open this setting. Just give me 1 second while I do this.
So what this proves is that this is actually a tool that is built from one to many, and prove that all the guys that are out there saying, this is a free tool and I won't use it. They're proving they're totally wrong, right?
Right. So we go here and the setting. I'm going to give you a good example. This one is actually a script. So many will say, oh, but a script to check for compliance. That's correct. We're building the script, and the return value is going to tell us if that value is in place or not. So we can click Edit. And we can set Edit Script, and we will see the script that we are actually using to check for remediation. Nice. So if we check, this is the compliant, and say, oh, it's not compliant, and we are looking here into the values, and it says not compliant. So what I can do is I can build a remediation script. I can take the same script as example. Whether or not that script returns a true value, we can add another script for remediation here into our system, into the VBA script, and say, hey, now I'm going to remediate that value. If that is supported, all right, go ahead, remediate using that script into each of the system and fix the problem for you.
Nice.
So I will go back here. Let me see if my one of my servers already pick up the policy. Machine. I don't see the policy here yet, so it may take a while to refresh the policy here into our system. Right?
Okay, so can you shoot back to the machine?
Yeah, go ahead. Put no, that's not the one.
4.
Click on the 4.
Thank you.
There you go.
One last thing that I wanted to show you guys is, where is all the switches that I just shown you how to use local GPO, they're included in the guides. So if you go to the Security Compliance Manager and go to the Attachments Guides section of each and every module, you will find, like Santos told you, the actual guide. If you open that guide, and again, Santos' recommendation was to still, check the guide and go through it. If you check for and search for local GPO, in every guide, I mean every guide, there is the Introducing to Local Policy tool. So it says, all the way from installation with screenshots, where it's located, what's the path, and then all the examples. From ground zero, from click start, go here, this is the command that you need to use, this is an example. So there's no need to be afraid of the command line. Again, this tool is very lightweight and still very powerful. All the screenshots are there. Again, you don't need to wait till this presentation is available to start playing with this. Just install Security Compliance Manager, and again, under each module of every product, you will find the attachment guides, and within the guide, you will search for local GPO, and the instructions are there.
That's correct. So that basically concludes the demo that we have today. So we would like to open for discussion some of the questions. So the microphones are here in the middle. So if you guys want to ask us some questions, please stay here for a few seconds so we can learn what are the questions from everybody so we can answer some of those questions. I may be your question too.
Again, we still have time.
So like I mentioned, you can download SCM tool from the Microsoft download, or you can have it from your USB sticks. Here is also our emails. So
if you go to if you have the USB drive that you got in your backpack, the 16 gig USB drive. If you go to the Solution Accelerators and Private Cloud folder, inside that you have the Security Compliance Manager. There you have the installer. Or you can go to Microsoft download website.
So question there?
So I saw the list that you had of guides and things that you've downloaded. Was that the extent of the list, or is there one for SQL?
So those guides, let me switch over to the machine so I can show you exactly those guides. So every of these, four, sorry. So every SCM baseline will come with those guides. So if you go here to the attachment and guides, you can go to the document and you will be able to open that document. And again, if you go to the installation pad of SCM, for example, it's here, C Public, Microsoft, you will see all those guides. All those baselines that we import, you will see them all here. So we'll be able to actually open those guides into each of the baseline. I think this is another place. All right, it's Microsoft. Security Compliance. So you will see all the EID for each baseline, and each baseline will have the guides.
But my question is that the extent of them? I see Windows, I see Exchange, I don't see Microsoft SQL Server.
Oh, right. So each of these baselines are the ones we are publicating. So every other month we will be publicating more baselines according to each of the products we are start supporting. So each of the guides that you have found online, all those guides will be converted into baseline. Yeah. So in the SCM version 2.0, we didn't have Exchange, to give you an example. And on this version, we released Exchange. So we're going to continue creating more baselines all the time.
SCM. If you check for updates, you will usually get new baselines or updates for that baseline, or with a new release. Again, like Santos says, the team is working on that.
Okay, so I actually have two questions. Want to follow up to that. I don't see an SCCM baseline. In 2007 you have the DCM for configuration, checking your DPs and configuration like. So for 2012, is there a baseline available?
Right. So if you mean a baseline specific to configuration manager product, like to lock down the product itself,
or to just check configuration, report even.
Right. So every baseline that you see there for every product, Windows, Exchange, Windows 7, you can export that into configuration manager. You export that and then import it into the system like we did here. Yeah. But there is not something yet for the product itself to lock down the product.
That's right, for the product.
For the product itself, there's nothing yet. Okay. So we got Exchange already. We're going to work on SQL. We're working on Windows. We have many more will come.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second question was more to including a local policy as far as base build and then for deployment. And I'm going to give you a scenario where we may have remote laptop users where we have to send hardware to, and we need to lock that system down in the event that it doesn't get to them. We want to have a policy. Basically, so you would put this particular policy for that user, I guess,
right.
As part of your gold, so that when you send it, that policy would apply.
Right. It is a mobile user, yeah. Like you mentioned. We don't have configuration manager to make sure, because this task will run every month or every day or every week. So in configuration manager, we'll have that task to check for compliance. If they are mobile users and they haven't checked out with my system during that period, they will go ahead and apply those machines to check out for compliance. If it's a local machine that doesn't have configuration manager, what I recommend, right, is having a scheduled task with that little script, and that little script make it to run every month.
Yes.
And that will reapply that policy. Or you can run it daily. Let's say that policy, you want to make sure that user has that setting every day. Put it in a scheduled task on every day. You will be able to do it.
Or as an hour run task, the hour run, and you will get it done.
So I had a question about the update. How often does this baseline get updated? The ones which are already there, do we have to go and check and reapply again because if it changes? Or?
Right.
Yeah, it depends on the product team. Whenever they release an update baseline, you can go and click check for updates and
What I would recommend you, right, once you decide that that baseline will be in compliance for your environment, and let's say we release a new baseline for that product that you're already put in place, you can validate the settings. For example, in our beta version, we had 285 settings for Exchange, but then in the public release, we decided to put 265. So there's a big difference of 30 settings that we are not putting in place, for example, right? Or 20 settings that we are not putting there, for example. So it's your decision, like, to make sure you want to deploy these extra new settings. All you got to do is put the new items into that baseline, or recreate the baseline again and deploy it. So that will be the way you will maintain that group policy or that baseline into Configuration Manager. Right?
How does it interact with the GPO central store and ADMX if you have a 2008 R2 functional forest, or can we import a baseline in that? Or?
Basically, when you have the tool and you click export and local GPO export, you will have your folder. If you go to your 2008 R2 domain controller, then you just can import that policy. Whatever you decide, what's the scope of that policy, it's up to you. So you can decide to what users or computers or forests or domain controllers you want to use that policy with. So you're getting the ADMX file. It's up to you where and when do you want to deploy it and to who you want to deploy that ADMX file.
Okay.
Again, it's the policy itself. So you can play with it.
Right. Next question.
Yeah, I was curious, what if you already have a goal build process and you're wanting to snapshot that build and then use it as a baseline? And or, I have application goal build baseline, so I want to set, a fundamental baseline, run a new installation around a goal build for an application, then snapshot it again. Is there a way for me to capture those cabs and then use those to import?
Right, that will be the perfect example of a golden image, or a golden machine. So we select that golden machine that you have put dedication, make sure that all those settings are corrected for a user, are now compliant. Take the local GPO and export that into a GPO pack, and you will be able to leverage that. Or basically, you can also do it if you wanted to for Configuration Manager. You export that into Configuration Manager from the local GPO, and then use that baseline to deploy it to your system.
Okay. Again, the tool is very useful when you step back and start thinking about the whole deployment process. Then you'll, I need to build my golden machine. I need to install the applications or the base applications. All these base policies that won't change. Those are, they're gonna be there forever. And then after that, you can also use MGT, which is another solution accelerator, and the Windows Embedded Installation Kit in order to capture that image and then use all the different products in order to deploy that solution. But yes, SCM is a great tool to have in mind and to use it when you are planning your deployment process, your deployment strategy. So you can secure those machines in advance, and then when you have your image and you run sysprep or whatever, the image is already secure. You don't need to deploy that in a branch where usually
we got a goal build, but we have a legacy environment we're trying to get to the goal build, right?
Right.
So having be able to take a new snapshot, do a comparison, and then slowly increment the remediation through it in an automated fashion versus
basically export a GPO pack and then deploy it as whatever you want. You can deploy it standalone, or if you have a domain controller, then just a regular export will work.
Right.
It's up to you. You're welcome.
What's the default refresh time on this? Between scanning to see if it's compliant and, if necessary, remediate based on whatever you defined?
In Configuration Manager,
so for example, I know with GPOs, default would be about 45 minutes, if I recall, historically. What is it with SCM?
With SCM, basically, you're applying the policy manually. So if you're working with the command line, you hit enter, and it says, please restart the computer. You need to restart the computer if you have computer settings.
Right,
if you have user settings, then it's up to your local policy what's the refresh rate. Usually the default is 90 minutes plus minus 30 minutes. That's the default in Windows 7.
Standard.
If you change that, it's up to the local policy of how and when's the refresh interval in that machine.
And if it's in Configuration Manager, then you set up the schedule in Configuration Manager to monitor that you want to remediate a specific setting, you go to that setting and you say, oh, enable this for remediation whenever they don't find that setting, and it will be the same. It will just be applicable. We'll fix that issue for you in a given time, let's say 7 days on a monthly basis.
And is there any effort or thoughts to making the baseline templates based on federal or industry compliance standards, say like Defense Department, DISA State?
Right. So we have internally in Microsoft, in the services division, we have a few baselines that are specific to federal, that are specific to government agencies that we are being developed right now. They are not public yet, but as soon as we finish and master those regulations, we will be releasing pack. Let's say this will be a GLBA pack, this will be a HIPAA pack, this will be a different law compliance. We are working hard on getting those also.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. What we ask for you guys is to, be a little bit patient.
Yeah.
Well, that level. Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I just want to say, if anyone has configuration manager specific questions, I work for configuration manager team, so I could probably answer some of those as well.
Right. Thank you very much.
The last question I was going to ask about NISC, FDCC compliance, SCAP, and the USGCB, all these federal settings.
You can
Again,
export
these
to
are things that
SCAP.
are happening now but don't exist yet. Is that what I just heard?
All right.
All right, thank you.
Go.
Still open for question? Quick question. So now we have two ways to manage configuration. One through the AD GPO, which applies to the whole domain, and now you have SCM inside SCCM. So what's the pros and cons, or how
Using a
do we do it?
standalone SCN versus using it with Configuration Manager?
Right,
No, I mean,
you can
the
deploy the
policy.
whole domain either through AD or through SCCM.
I mean, they're not different ways. SCM is a tool that will help you do more with your your AD environment. Plus, if you don't have an AD environment, SCM can help you apply policies.
So here, assumption is we have an AD environment, and so should I go with put everything into AD GPO, or I should go for SCCM?
So if you have Configuration Manager in place, and if you want to make sure they are compliant and then remediate, so remember, Configuration Manager will bring you a lot of reports for compliance. So you make sure how many machines are in compliance. And then you can go and create a collection for those machines that are not compliant, and you can say, oh, I'm going to deploy a script to remediate those machines that are not compliant. Okay. Or I can enable remediation for some of the settings. So I will say, if you had Configuration Manager, go the Configuration Manager way, with the compliance setting to ensure that their machines are in compliance, and then you can remediate those much more easier. Yes. Because the reporting services that we have into Configuration Manager is very strong, and with AD, we got some tools to make sure those policies are being applied, but it will take you more time than using with Configuration Manager.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
and at the same time, if you don't have Configuration Manager, then you can still deploy those policies, but you're not having all those reporting capabilities. So.
Okay, so continue on that line. What if there's a setting conflict between the AD policy and the SCCM policy?
Right, that's a good question. I have that question a couple of times. So you have that into Active Directory. That policy is going to be applied with Active Directory. So Configuration Manager will check for that policy, make sure that policy is applied, and we'll tell you the results. We'll tell you, hey, those machines are not applying those GPOs, so they are not compliant. So you can bring the reporting to Config Manager and say they are not compliant. But let's say you put that setting to be in compliance, and we fix it. And every 90 minutes, that GPO will change the value. Then you will be fighting between Configuration Manager and AD for that setting. Because a GPO will say, oh, that setting is 0. But then every month, Configuration Manager will say, no, that value is 1, and I will enable remediation and I put 1. But if you don't put remediation, there's no fighting. There will be just checking, right?
So, or let me tell you another example. If you're applying local policies with local GPO and policies with your AD, then remember that the local policies are still going to be applied. But if you have any conflict, the DC ones are the ones that are going to apply and be enforced.
Right, so you're saying that the DC GPO will win?
Again, when you check your policy, your structure, how the policies are applied, local policies are still part of that equation.
Right.
If you have one or a few policies that are in conflict, the domain controller ones. I mean, the one that is in the lower OU, the OU that is, you know, nearest to the object, to the Active Directory object, is the one that is going to win the battle. Let's call it that way. Okay. So that's the one that is going to apply if you have a conflict between domain controller policies and local policies.
Okay, cool. I do have a second question.
Can you speak to the microphone, please?
I do have a second question. So for each baseline, you have like 200 plus settings, right?
Yes.
And so right now, I don't have anything deployed in our environment. But if I say I deploy one baseline, it might break some application. It might block some firewall, some registry setting. So what's your recommendation for implementation in the existing environment? So make sure we don't break any applications.
So you should always do like a QA, right? You create that baseline. You read the manual. You know exactly what will be the goal of that baseline. So I will recommend is deploying that baseline to one client first. Check the compliance. Make sure it doesn't break anything. That will be your QA. I always ensure that any of the settings that you're implementing for any given application or to any given setting doesn't break that application. Yeah. It's like a little bit Q&A, a quality assurance, making sure that policy is what I want to have deployed.
Always have a lab environment first before going production.
Right.
Right. But based in your real-world experience, it's pretty safe, is it?
Right. So far, I have deployed these 2000s. I have grabbed Windows 7 Service Pack 1, computer security and deployed to 2,000 machines, 10,000 machines. I haven't break any applications.
Yeah, me neither. So.
Okay. And this is supported by Microsoft?
That's correct.
And it's built by Microsoft and supported by Microsoft.
Right.
I mean, if you call Microsoft and say, I have a problem,
yeah.
and SCM is part of that equation of all the solutions that you have in place, they're going to support it. They're going to give you support because you have SCM.
Yeah. If you have a problem, you can call CSS and say, hey, I'm having an issue with the baseline that I deploy. Or you can contact your local TAM, and he will be able to give you a premier field engineer to talk to you about it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks to you for your question.
Question.
Yeah.
So for the OU structure, how do you define, like say if I have a group policy for Exchange and for member servers, do you separate them and apply, or do you just put all the group policy in one location so it knows it's Exchange, it's going to apply that? How does that work?
I will merge the baselines, definitely. I will select those baselines, all the baselines that I want for those machines, and I will then merge the baselines. So the reason for merge of those baselines will be to ensure there's no duplicated effort on each of the baselines. So you select those two baselines, and then you merge them into one, and in the merge setting in SCM, we'll tell you, hey, these are the common these 4, these 10, these 20 settings are the same in both sections. So we're just going to merge them. That will be definitely the best effort. Instead of applying 2 separate baselines, merge those baselines.
Exactly.
So in the AD structure, how would you define the OU? If I was to do the group policy through AD, do you have it like separate for Exchange and separate for the other member servers?
So in that case, I may have a separate Exchange and a separate AD or DC that I want to have through group policy. So I can make the decision, hey, this will be Exchange, and this will be any DCs that I have, any DHCPs or DNS. So that will be good to have them separate in that case. But there may be some baseline that are applicable to one machine that has multiple roles, and I want them just deployed to them. You can do that, definitely.
Yes, and there's the option. Just in the right pane, just compare and merge right here.
All right. Thank you all for coming. You got more questions?
Okay, thank you. If you have any more questions, we're going to be around. Thank you, guys.